Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Barkley, and today we're going to talk about non-lethal predator management. Now, the first question that's probably popped into your head is, but don't we want to get rid of predators? Aren't they bad? They kill livestock. And the answer is yes and no. I'm going to give you a couple of things to consider when you go about deciding whether or not a problem predator should be removed. So, when we back up to the very base of things, predators are part of a balanced ecosystem. They help us, and they help us by eating ruminants, so deer, or they eat rabbits, other creatures that may be eating grazing resources that our grazing livestock need. If we have nuisance pests such as mice or rats, those predators or other predators may be eating those critters to keep their populations in check. So, from those perspectives, predators might be a good thing. When we think about removing predators, whether it be an aggressive individual or otherwise, removing them, especially if they're from a pack scenario, can result in the breakdown of pack social structure. This can lead to kind of two different things. The first is that females within that population may feel the need to reproduce at higher rates in order to kind of make up for the dissonance and dissociation that's going on among the pack. The other thing that can happen is that the confusion going on within the pack can result in other predators coming in to take the one's place that you've eliminated. And the bad news about this is that that new predator that moves in might be more aggressive or more in tune to consuming livestock than the first predator was. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind when we go about deciding whether or not a predator needs to be removed. There are three different ways that we can control predators that are non-lethal. Those are biological, those are management, and those are physical. And I'm going to go through each one of those individually. When we think about biological, what we're doing is essentially creating a predator-resistant gene pool within our herd or flock. So I'm going to use sheep for the first instance. Now, just say you go into your flock and there are a couple of individuals that are sitting there and stomping at you. Or if you let your herding dog out, they will stamp and stand their ground against the herding dog. Those sheep are very likely to stand their ground against a predator. And so you want those genetics to be propagated among your stock. So keeping those ewe lambs, keeping a ram out of the ram lambs, and breeding that may end up shifting your population to become more resistant to predation. Poultry are a little bit different. They're not big enough to stand up to a predator. So in breeding those, you want to breed those which are more alert, faster, and lighter bodied, such as the leghorn that we have in the picture. Those poultry which have impediments, whether it be weight related like a Pekin duck who can't really get away from predators really easy, or something like a Polish chicken who's got feathers over their eyes, making it hard to see, those critters are a little more susceptible to being picked off simply because of their innate genetics. The second term that I want to go over is management. And these are control measures that we can take to reduce a herd or flock's attractiveness to scavenging predators. Now, scavenging predators aren't on their own necessarily a bad thing, but if the timing is right where they have hungry mouths to feed, if they're a mom, if they are falling on hard times, or if they see your livestock as a really easy source of food, they might turn and they might attack your livestock. So a couple things that we can think about in terms of management are, the first I have here is birthing on a schedule. That is not when your predator is birthing or has hungry mouths to feed. By doing this, it's going to help keep your youngest stock safer because they're going to be grown up a little bit by the time that the predators are raising their young, making them less attractive to go after. The next thing I have here is keeping pastures clean of afterbirth. Most ruminant animals are going to go through and eat the afterbirth as a naturally evolved precaution to predation. Sometimes, though, if an animal cleanses late, or if you move pastures before she has a chance to clean up that afterbirth, you're going to want to go ahead and after her and remove it yourself. That just keeps everything clean, everything a little bit safer for your herd or flock. If you have mortalities, and you should be checking for mortalities once or twice a day, that's typically when livestock caretakers are checking their flocks or herds, you're going to want to remove those as you see them. And don't just dispose of them somewhere else on your property. Because by having those dead animals on your property, just say if you're throwing them in the back 40, and the idea is that scavenger can come by and just eat it and it'll be gone and it'll be fine. What you're actually doing is attracting scavenging predators to your property, and they understand, hey, this is a free and easy meal. If for some reason that meal isn't there and they're relying on that food source, they may in turn go after your livestock. So by burying them, by rendering them if you have that service in your area, or by composting them, it makes them inaccessible to predators, especially those which scavenge. When we talk about physical means, there are quite a few ways to keep predators out of herds or flocks. And the first and most effective is fencing. Now, that can be a hardwire fence, that can be electronet, but as long as it's a net wire and it's high enough, that's really going to stop critters in their tracks. They're not going to think that the animal behind is high enough value if they've got something a lot easier that they can attack outside of the fence. Poultry are a little bit of a special situation here. If they're in an enclosed run, or if their coop is enclosed with just regular 1-inch or 2-inch chicken wire, going ahead and putting a hardware cloth on that instead can reduce the potential of critters that can rip the wire. A lot of predators can rip chicken wire. Just keeps them safer. When we think about barns as a physical means of protecting animals, we want to make sure that the doors on that barn are closed tightly, especially during times of high risk, such as at night. Just because the livestock are in a barn doesn't necessarily mean that they're safe unless everything is closed up. In terms of poultry specific, in thinking of how to predator-proof a poultry house or a poultry barn, if you have gaps that are larger than an inch, you're going to want to seal those up. Anything less than an inch, nothing much is going to get through. But things like weasels, things like mink, they can get through 1-inch gaps, or they can kind of squeeze their way through and get into a pen and wreak havoc. Additionally, thinking about pens with solid floors could be something to protect poultry. There are a lot of predators that will dig under pens, and we had this experience at our farm. The picture at the right shows one of our mobile coops where we had a raccoon dig under, and it took out a bird. Now, luckily, it only took one bird and left everybody else okay. But after that, we decided to install solid floors on our coop, and we haven't had any trouble with predators since. Another option is, if you don't want to put a solid floor in a coop, is to go ahead and bury perimeter wire or bricks around the outside of a coop and or run, and that can be an added precautionary measure. Another item that's very popular to use is dissuading devices. And what dissuading devices do is they essentially cause a predator to think that whatever is within the perimeter of that dissuading device is potentially dangerous to them. And so it will dissuade them or push them around that area where the animals are, thereby protecting them. So these can be things like fox lights, noisemakers. If you have poultry in a small area, you can run wires with foil pans to prevent aerial predators from attacking. You can have a mannequin dressed up in really flappy clothes, and so when the wind blows, it flaps that mannequin around, and it really is kind of scary to some predators. Or you could have a flappy arm tube man, kind of like they have in the used car parking lots. These can be effective as well. But what's really important to remember about any of these devices, anything that's steady state, that does one single function, is that these are not permanent solutions. The animals that you're scaring will become used to them over time, even if they're rotated. Now, if they're rotated, you're going to get more life out of them. But generally speaking, these aren't permanent solutions, and they should be used in conjunction with other means of protecting livestock. Now, livestock guardians are a dissuasion device too, but they're different in that they're dynamic. They will do something and it's going to be different every time, and a predator is not going to know what that animal is going to do necessarily. It won't necessarily go after animals that are protected by a guardian because they don't want to be attacked themselves. Now, the guardian that you choose should be larger than the predator, or it's not going to do a whole lot. So for instance, you're not going to use a guard goose to protect a flock of chickens against a coyote. The coyote is going to eat the guard goose, even if that guard goose is doing his best to protect the flock, because it's a smaller animal. And even though geese are aggressive, it is a prey animal. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I want to talk for 1 second about an escalation strategy. So escalation strategies are used mostly by dogs, and it is a way for them to protect their charges. So what they'll do is if they spot a threat, they'll first go through and bark at that threat, hoping to scare it off. If that doesn't work, they will pursue the threat to chase it off. If that doesn't work, fighting will ensue. And then if that doesn't work, the livestock guardian will likely kill the animal. Now, properly trained livestock guardians are going to bond to your herd or flock and really use this escalation strategy to protect whenever they feel that a threat has come on. Now, this video is an example of an escalation strategy. This is a goose, so it is not a dog, but the goose is using very similar tactics to what a dog would use. So what I want you to notice is in the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a goose and his chicken charges. The goose is the big white blob. And that poor truck sitting in the driveway who doesn't know what's going to happen to him yet is our meter reader. So here's a little bit of what's going to happen. The goose starts by watching. Doesn't work, so he honks, thinking that might scare him. And that doesn't work, so now he's going to chase the threat. Looking big, flapping his wings, being really scary. If the guy got out of the truck, he'd probably chase the guy down and rip at his pant leg. But now that the goose is seeing that the threat's retreating, the guy's backing out of the yard, he goes back to protecting his flock. So very similar to what a dog would do, but in this case, it's a goose. And that's all I have for you tonight. So thank you guys so much for your attention. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them in the comment box. I'm going to include a link in the description of the video to the original podcast that I listened to get some of this information off of. It is put out by the American Sheep Industry Association, and it's really informative. It's about an hour and a half or so, and it really dives deep into predator management and how predator minds work. It's a very interesting listen. It's for sheep, but most of the information in there applies across species. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.